Influencers, inspiration, and Instagram. This is Earned by Tribe Dynamics. Here's Connor Begley.
Hi, everyone. Connor here. Welcome back to Earned, where we try to bring you all of the top players that are disrupting beauty and fashion. We are incredibly lucky today to have Reuben Carranza join us, who might know more about the hair care industry than anyone else in the world, and is valiantly leading Kate Somerville as the CEO now. Welcome to the show, Reuben.
Thank you, Connor. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, I mean, I was telling you this before we started the call, but you are quite an impressive fellow, my friend. Your accomplishments are staggering.
You're really buttering me up. This is gonna be a grilling. I'm anticipating.
Well, this is how you, as an interview, you kind of make them really feel really nice, and then you drop the hammer.
Sure.
No.
Thank you.
Just for those that don't know Reuben, here's a few of Reuben's accomplishments. So Reuben started at P&G out of school and was there for over 23 years, eventually becoming the CEO of Wella North America, leading a team of over 500 people. He was then the president of R+Co at Luxury Brand Partners, which he took it from basically startup to scale in terms of large numbers of revenue, and then joined as the president of Olaplex, which is the number one brand we track typically in hair care from an EMV perspective, and you doubled the business in less than 18 months and then helped to sell the brand for what was a rumored $1 billion to Advent, as well as being the former chairman of the Professional Beauty Association, which I found out has over 1 million members. And then now the CEO of Kate Somerville, which, in 2020, at least from an EMV perspective, is up 77% year over year, while skincare is down 14%. So, outperforming the market by 91%, which is, I think we do see, but not often from an established brand who's been around for a little while, right? So to kind of have that kind of acceleration is super impressive. So congrats again on all of the success.
Thanks, Connor. It's really a great team and a great brand.
So let's start out with, I think one of the things that's top of mind for me, before we get into your background and your leadership philosophies and marketing philosophies, hot topic right now is the election, right? And I think now that we are kind of past at least the bulk of the election festivities, I'd love to hear about what your approach was as a brand. You're coming into this election, it's incredibly divisive. There's obviously people that have very strong opinions on both sides of the fence there. And if you lean one way versus the other, you're likely to alienate that group. How did you guys approach that kind of coming into the election? Was it something you gave a lot of thought to during the election and then after the election? What was your marketing approach there?
Yeah, great question, Connor. I mean, I think, we're a brand that operates globally, right? So while we had the US elections that were happening, we operate in the UK. So there was, over the course of the last few years, there's been a lot of political strife there, particularly with Brexit and all of those things. And then we operate in China, cross-border. So our approach from a brand standpoint has been to be pretty consistent. We're very apolitical, right? So we don't take, as a brand, a political stance. We don't advocate one way or the other. And that really goes back to the founder, Kate, and her whole philosophy, right? So our brand is all about people and skin, right? If you've got skin and you have a concern or you have a need, we want to be the brand that helps you with all of that. What I would say that was, I think, a bit different this year was, a lot of the activities that started to happen with Black Lives Matter and the whole push on diversity was already something that we were looking at from a brand standpoint in terms of how do we, if we really are living to the mission of serving everyone regardless of their skin tone, we needed to make sure that we were also reflective of that in the people we were working with, the makeup of our organization, et cetera. So a lot of that was already in process. And I think we participated right away when some of the activity started with Black Lives Matter, as well as Put Up or Shut Up. That was already part of who we were as a company. And so, we know we've got work to do and also with who we're working with. And that was probably from a marketing standpoint. It wasn't a marketing standpoint, it was more DNA of the brand, but that was one of the elements that was a bit atypical in the political environment because those things really came to fruition, right? And that's we embraced the challenge of really being a brand that is for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough situation knowing whether to take a stance or not, and kind of how to approach that, particularly when, like you said, we are an apolitical brand. We don't have, one side or the other
Right.
here. So
Right.
yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So let's kind of start at the top with your background. So, while I was researching you and researching your family, and I'm sure this is the blight of all twins, but, of course I compared you to your twin. So your twin brother is I believe it's the chancellor and director of education at the New York City School District, which is really awesome. And I think, comparing you to, or looking at you two, right, your accomplishments are super impressive. Would you say your parents had a particular secret to raising two people that were so successful, or, what was the, I've got kids right now, I've got two myself, so I want to make sure that I'm doing everything that I can to raise them like you guys.
Well, that's a big compliment, Connor. Honestly, he's my identical twin brother. Again, he's the chancellor of New York schools, the 5 boroughs. So I think it's 1,000,001 students that are part of the borough of the school district. So he's got the harder job, quite honestly. But you know what? It really just comes down to, we have a huge extended family in Arizona where we were born and raised, but it was just my brother and I in our immediate family. And working class parents. My mom was a hairdresser. My dad was in sheet metal construction. And they really just had a couple of key things that they pounded into us. It was, go to school and get an education and work hard, right? And be, and don't take for granted the opportunities you have in front of you, and work hard. So that's always been kind of part of what we've done and how we've done and how we've chosen to kind of progress. But I do have to say that I've got better hair than him, and I'm a little taller than him. So you can compare all you want. He's a little older than me, but...
Well, after all the years in the hair care industry, I would hope that you have better hair.
Exactly.
And I will say, commentary, you have fantastic hair. I think you and Aurelian are like number 1A and 1B for best hair we've interviewed so far. I certainly do not qualify. I think I've had the same haircut since I was in 7th grade. I should probably rethink, considering the number of professional hairstylists that we interact with.
It's working for you, Connor. Go with it.
That makes a ton of sense. I mean, I obviously latch on to the kind of the work hard thing.
Yeah.
And I actually don't know that I necessarily had that really early on. I think for me, I actually kind of got by with, I was like a good test taker, and, I could kind of slide by without having to work hard. And so I think I almost reveled in that a little bit. Like, I don't have to work that hard to do pretty well. And then I realized it's like, no, this is actually how you get ahead, right?
Yeah.
Especially as things get more and more competitive, right? As you go into high school and college and workforce, if you put in 10% more than the next person, that compounds over time pretty dramatically.
Absolutely.
And so, that makes a ton of sense. So talk to me about, I think the other thing that stood out as I was looking at your background is, it looks like this is like the job profile of two different people, right? So it looks like you're doing 2 full-time jobs all the time, with the Professional Beauty Association, and you do a lot of mentorship, and then you have all of your, your regular job. So how do you actually manage your time just day to day? Like how do you prioritize things? How do you remain focused? Do you have any systems there that you use?
I'm in a constant struggle and search for ways to do that. And as I've gotten older, I think you learn how to do it a little better. But what I would say, Connor, is I think how you spend your time is a choice. And that was one of the first things I had to kind of get my arms wrapped around was, if I let the calendar or the agenda drive my activities, then I already was lost, right? So it's about prioritization and what you want to be those core pillars that are part of your calendar. And that includes time for yourself, right? And then it's where do you want to be spending your time? Because, I'm one of those individuals who I could sit on the couch and watch, a whole season of Housewives of Beverly Hills and not even think twice about it, right? But, and I still do that as guilty pleasures. But there's also, when I think about, at the end of this time period, what do I want to feel good about? Am I contributing to my community? Am I contributing to my industry? Am I contributing to my family? Am I contributing to my spouse? Those questions, right, kind of is what keeps me honest about stuff. And we learned how to multitask very early. So I'm a professional musician. My brother was a professional musician,
Yeah.
and we started performing young. So we would go to school, we'd have to do homework, and then we'd perform and practice and those kinds of things. And in the weekends, we'd be performing. So I think learning how to make those choices, and my parents are both deceased now, but when they were still alive, they would say, part of their strategy was keep us focused in school and keep us busy outside of school so that we didn't have any opportunities for bad distractions, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's also played a role in it, but it really does come down to choice, right? You make a choice around what's important, and then you try to calendarize that and make sure that you're giving yourself the proper guardrails, if you will, to live the choices you're making.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge advocate of that. I mean, I think for me, I try to, on a regular basis, just look at my calendar and say, is this reflective of like how I want to be spending my time, right? Or what, not how I want to be, but what is the best way to be spending my time?
Yeah.
And to give that thought, right, on a regular basis, like, hey, let's write down like what are the 3 or 4 things that I should really be focusing on right now,
Right.
and then am I spending my time in a way that contributes to those, right? So that's great. I'm also glad to know that you have a third profession as well. So I've got 3 full-time jobs that you're doing, which I would love to hear you guys. I think you play mariachi, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I didn't go that far in my research. I didn't realize there was stuff I could probably find online with you guys playing. But I think that's going to have to be a follow-up item for me.
You're really good, Connor. You really did the due diligence. I love that.
Well, I think it's I hope that you spend time beforehand so that when you get in it's easier and you're hitting the stuff that matters, right?
Right.
So okay, well let's continue along the journey, right? So you were at P&G. I think the thing that's always been interesting for me about P&G is their management program was really kind of mythologized, right? Mm-hmm. And I think particularly during the time that you were there, like it's just something that was kind of a part of the management lore, so to speak.
Correct.
Right? And so can you tell me a little bit about that program, maybe how it contributed to your success, what it looks like, some of the lessons that you've drawn from it? Because I think you've obviously built a career off of building culture and process and managing people.
Right.
Would love to hear about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. In fact, one of the reasons that I chose to go to P&G was because right out of college was because of the training program. And it was actually my dad who, in the conversation, I had a couple of different offers, and one of the things that he said was, this is a blue chip company. They have a training program. Even if you don't stay for a career, you will learn things there that you won't learn anywhere else, right? And he was absolutely right with it. So when I joined as a part of the selling function. And so I had a 52-week training program, and literally that is how everything was done, right? So when you joined as a new hire, there was a 52-week plan that your manager was held accountable for, and you were held accountable for, and it literally had learning elements every single week that you would practice, you would get evaluated on, and there was a formal sign-off process related to it, right?
Wow.
And it was everything from how do you walk into a physical retail location and quickly get a scan on where the opportunities are, where where there are issues? How do you build collaborative relationships? How do you negotiate? How do you turn a no to a yes? I mean, on and on and on. And but I will tell you, it's been interesting because I think if you were to look at that, someone who hadn't been through that would look at that and go, "Isn't that a bit much?" But and I had that perspective, having gone through it, and then having had to grow people in my organization, hire people, train them, take them through the 52-week program. The repetitiveness and the drumbeat is what I call it, kind of that consistency of how you build capability was really, really important. And it did 2 things. Number one, you were able to have a very specific set of capabilities at the end of that 52-week period that were checked off on, but you also knew that anybody who had been through the 52-week program had gotten to a certain level of mastery. And that happened in sales, that happened in marketing, it happened in product supply. And so kind of part of that whole training dynamic with P&G was, some people didn't like it. Some people felt like they wasn't part of what they were about. There was about a 50% attrition rate. But I will tell you is that foundation created a completely different dynamic in the organization. Because if you, for example, when I became a manager and I was looking to hire people or look at people that were transferring from one business to another, I knew that if they had been through this program, I knew all of the capabilities I could count on. I wasn't having to think about, does this person know how to actually do a certain set of financials? Does this person know how to actually carry themselves? So it created an equivalization of capability that just kind of allowed people to grow. So,
Well, I think what's amazing about that is just that's not like a simple program to put together, right?
No,
So like
no.
that's something that took a lot of time and effort and thought. And you would
Correct.
assume that would be the case within all large multinational corporations, but I don't think that's the case.
Correct.
And so I'm trying to think if Tribes is it's either a 52-hour or a 52-day training program. I'm not sure. It's somewhere in between those two. I was like, I think it's more than 52 hours, but I'm not sure.
I can help you put together a 52-week one if you need one, Connor, but I think you guys are doing just fine.
We're okay. I mean, we can always an opportunity to get better. I think there's a really good book. God, I'm blanking on the name. It was from the old 49ers coach. And basically what he did was when he first came in, it was Bill Walsh. When he first came in, he wrote up like a really extensive kind of manual for every single position in the entire organization, all the way down to, the people answering the phones, right? The receptionists. And just like, this is how you answer the phone. This is what, and it kind of reminds me a lot of what you're talking about.
Right.
And then it gave everybody like, this is what you'll be measured on. This is how you'll be successful. And it's like, it sounds straightforward, but the time and effort he put forward there was it was transformative for them as an organization.
Correct.
And I think it's now, you're seeing a lot of people use that to, transform their own organizations, whether it's nonprofit or profit or whatever.
Right.
So
But
that's pretty cool.
The only other comment I was going to make is I would say that I think anybody who leads an organization, whether they're an entrepreneur or in a big company, should start as a sales rep or should have a selling experience in their experience set. I used to have to make 8 to 10 calls a day. I was selling Folgers coffee, right? And I thought, I went to university, I was the student body president at the university, and now I'm selling, Folgers coffee to people who are saying no to me every day. And it really was on an average, right? It was like literally you're getting told no 8 times a day. And by the end of the first kind of 3 months, you were like 50-50. You were figuring out how to turn the nose. And then you started getting even better than that. And what better experience, right? I mean, as an entrepreneur, you're getting told no multiple times. The people who are successful, the managers who are successful in an organization, whether it's a corporate or an independent business, are the ones who know how to take the no and turn it into a yes. So that's my only kind of commentary I would make. And I said that to, when I had 400 salespeople at Wella, when we used to do the sales meetings, I used to say the same thing. I started where you guys are at. This is the best learning you can get because you learn how to take a no and turn it into a yes.
Absolutely. And I think, honestly, sales, I think just comes down to communication, right? Like, Can you communicate an idea? Can you understand what someone's problems are and how to help them through those problems? So I think and if you look at it just, I think statistically, the most common path to CEO is sales, right? That's the most common path to being a CEO. And so I think it's a highly underrated skill set. I certainly started my career there for sure. Well, while we're on the topic of startups, let's talk about R+Co. So you were at P&G, right? You had a fantastic career there, leading massive teams. And we'll talk a little bit about your leadership learnings from those experiences.
Okay.
But to kind of continue through the background, that's a big leap to go from P&G, massive P&L, to like very entrepreneurial, very kind of startup oriented new company. What was that transition like? Like what was difficult about it?
So I have to give you a couple of minutes of context so you understand how I made that transition, right? So
absolutely.
So I when I left P&G, it was after 24 years, right? And the last 8 years of those, I was leading the Wella businesses in North America, which were really like an independent company under the auspices of the big P&G world. The customers we had, the way that we went to market was unlike any other business in P&G, with the exception of the professional pharmaceutical part of our business and the veterinary sciences part of our business, right? So we're calling with independent business owners, et cetera. But it really, I felt like I was operating in a company that was kind of part of P&G, but completely outside of P&G. When I left, the reason I left was I had gotten to the point where it was time for me. I had already, typically at the level that I was at with leading Wella, you spend 3 to 4 years in those kind of roles, and then they move you on, right? I was now entering into year number 8. And, the next opportunities were promotions, but quite honestly, there was stuff I didn't want to go do. Like my heart and soul was in beauty. And that was one part of it. The second part of it was I had created, because I was operating kind of independently, I was also doing some things that would have been very difficult to do in the mainline business. So I had one of the best professional hair color lines with Colostone Perfect under Wella, but I didn't have a professional hair care line that could compete if I was going into a salon that was carrying Majorelle from L'Oreal and Kerastase, right? And so I was constantly, my organization was constantly, and I couldn't get the resources to kind of create this thing. And so what we ended up doing is actually reaching out to the CEO of Orbe Hair Care at the time, the two co-presidents, Dan Kaner and Ted Finger, and said, listen, and one of our salon owners, mutual salons had kind of put us together. And I said, listen, I've got the same issue you've got in reverse, because they were going into salons that were carrying Kerastase. They were saying, yes, we want to take on Orbe, but we need something to replace Majorelle, right? So we formed an alliance, and we worked that alliance for the last 3 years that I was at Wella, and it worked phenomenal for us. But I had gotten to the point when it was, where I was like, I really don't want to go back into the mainline business. I really do want to be an entrepreneur, because I was seeing so many consumer-driven insights related to products that we just were missing the boat in P&G, right? I will tell you at the time, one of the conversations was, every single stylist and consumer was talking about sulfate-free, paraben-free shampoos and conditioners. And I had, a lineup of R&D people in P&G who were saying, trying to convince me that that wasn't a real issue, right? And I was like, I'm right about the age that the next half of my career, I've done the corporate, I want to be an entrepreneur. So when I told my my colleagues at Orbe that I was doing this, they're like, you're not going anywhere else. You're going to come work with us, because we are literally forming this company called Luxury Brand Partners. Orbe will be part of it, but we're launching a couple of other brands, and we need you to we want you to come and kind of lead one of these businesses. So that's how I made the move into entrepreneurship. I will tell you that what I have found is I've talked to some of my colleagues who have been at P&G. I think my transition was a little easier because I was already operating in a business that was kind of off the main line in P&G. So you had to be scrappy. You had to, think about some of the things that you might not normally do in the traditional business. But it was still a pretty big surprise. And, so that whole idea of you're an entrepreneur and Friday's payroll, like, can you pay people on Friday? That was probably the single biggest thing I felt in the first 30 days. I was like, holy shit, this is true. We've got X amount of capital. We got to get to X amount of scale. And if we don't, how are we going to pay people, right? So that whole Friday's payroll piece was a really big deal. The other thing that I learned was I had all these incredible ways of doing things and processes, right? But in the real world, you needed to make those really simple, right? Because you didn't have 10 people that could go do the complexity of what you were doing in the P&G world. So learning how to right size and make the right choices, I think, was the other piece. And then the third piece was, and quite honestly, was probably, along with Friday's payroll, this was probably the other big surprise, was being able to understand people's skills and capabilities that you had in the organization or were bringing in the organization. And I say that because remember what I was talking about, that 52-week training program, right? Yeah. I knew in P&G when I was recruiting for a brand marketer or a marketing director or a director of finance, there was a certain level that those roles were at. And I knew that the candidate pool internally, I knew that they were all at a certain level of capability because they had come up through the P&G structure. In the real world, right, where someone may be 2 years out of school and they've got a VP title, you can't go by the title. You have to really understand how do you go and really understand not just the title, but what was the work and what was the capability this individual built and what are they bringing to the table. That was a huge learning for me. That was probably one of the biggest.
Yeah, I mean, that's we obviously have been dealing with that since the beginning, right? We started the company 8 years ago. So that's the only world that I know is like I don't know, just because your title doesn't tell me very much, essentially, right? And so it's interesting that was a transition, that was something that was a difficult transition for you, because for me, that's just life. Like, that's just the only thing that I know, right? And so that's super, super interesting.
Yeah.
You also, I would say that it does go in both directions, though, right? So sometimes you get people where, like, the title is way ahead of what the capabilities are, but you also get times where it's like, whoa, like, this person's way better than we thought they were going to be, right?
Absolutely.
Like, this person is like, let's accelerate this really dramatically for them.
The
and
hidden
so
gems.
yeah, exactly. The Friday's payroll is, people don't talk about it very much, but it is a terrifying concept. There have been I'll leave it at that. So talk to me about luxury brand partners a little bit, right? So for me, it's always been a little bit of a mystery, and I feel like I'm learning a little bit here with Orbe, and which is to say that, it got kind of started by them. They wanted to launch more brands, but the successes that have come out of there, whether it's Becca, which was acquired by Estee, Pulp Riot was acquired by L'Oreal, then R+Co and IGK have done really well, right? What was the secret magic there? Like, one, why did they decide to do it? And then what has caused it to just churn out all of these successes? Because it's super impressive.
Yeah, so I can share with you some of the stuff that's already been in the public domain, because I think it's a fascinating story. So some of the initial founders of Orbe, so Luxury Brand Partners, prior to that was Orbe Haircare. Right, so the founders of Orbe Haircare were some of the principals that were part of Bumble and Bumble. And when Estee Lauder bought Bumble and Bumble, those folks did a transition. Then they had a non-compete period, and then they started Orbe Haircare in 2008 when the recession was happening. They rolled out this amazing product, right? And I think the thing that was so powerful about Orbe Haircare was, and it was kind of going to the history that they had with Bumble and Bumble and working with Michael Gordon, is working with founders, these people who are incredibly brilliant and creative and have a creative gift, is not an easy thing to do. It's not for the faint-hearted. And they had learned how to do that with Bumble. When they created Orbe, they created that brand. Then the same kind of principal founders or financial backers of Orbe Haircare created Luxury Brand Partners. Orbe was acquired into that. But the whole concept is kind of a brand incubator, right? They were one of the first that were doing that. It was, let's find these incredible artists who have incredible stories and have a vision, and we build brands that meet a consumer need for that with those artists, right? Orbe Haircare was one of those first ones with Orbe Canales. R+Co was the first attempt, as we were talking. So I joined at the concept stage, and it was, instead of having one brand, one artist for the brand, can we get a collective? Right? Can we do what Andy Warhol used to do and get kind of a collective of artists and actually take 1 + 1 + 1 and make it 5, right? And that was the ambition. Howard McLaren, who is still very well known in the hair cutting industry, and really came from Bumble and Bumble. Guerin, who is like Madonna and only goes by one name, Guerin, the godfather of hair. And Tom Priano, who is, the men's kind of equivalent, right? And bringing these three artists together to collaborate on a brand was really what, to me, was really exciting. But you saw with Becca was part of the organization as well. And Bob DeBaker, who's back with Luxury Brand Partners, I thought did some amazing things with Becca. When they had Becca was not necessarily a big brand, and he was one of the first to partner with an influencer, Jaclyn Hill. You saw what happened with that collection, and the brand blew up. And then partnering with some of the folks like David Thorsten and his wife, and how they created Pulp Riot. So it really is about partnering artists with a business idea and creating a brand that really is authentic to who that artist is. And that's at the core. I think what they've started to do now in some of the newer brands is those artists who traditionally were either industry artists like Howard McLaren or editorial artists like Darren and Orbe are now Instagram folks or social media folks, right? And so, but it's still the same concept, incubating these brands around these great artists.
Yeah, I mean, it was a well-timed theory because I think one of the things that we used to observe about that dynamic, right, of bringing in the artist and creating a brand around them is if you were to think about, so the example I always used was like Anastasia, right? So they obviously did very well. And I think that for her, if you think about what she did, right, for 20 or 30 years, she did the brows of all of the celebrities in, all the different celebrities, right? And then what happened is Instagram came around and all of those celebrities became the biggest publishers in the world, right?
Correct.
So now Jennifer Lopez has a bigger audience than Glamour or Pop Sugar or, any of these other publications. And so she basically built these relationships with dozens and dozens, potentially hundreds of people who are now all the biggest publishers in the world.
Correct.
And so now you as a celebrity hairstylist, makeup artist, brow artist, whatever it is, have this huge advantage that just kind of appeared out of nowhere.
Right.
To have direct access to the biggest editors at the biggest publications,
Yeah,
around.
absolutely.
And so, it worked out quite well for them. Good timing.
Well, and Tev Finger, who's the CEO of Luxury Brand Partners, just did an interview with the Glossy, and I think it's very consistent, right? So one of the other dynamics is the core partner group. They're still my partners. They understood and have understood what it's like not only to build a brand, to hero what an artist is able to do, but also knowing what companies who want to acquire brands are looking for because they've done the sales. So that's the other part of the secret sauce is they're not just building a brand to be creative and go off into the Netherlands. They also know the commercial aspect of what needs to be true, right? And so and the team that's there knows how to do that. And so it's an incredibly smart group of people.
Yeah, no, it's been super impressive to watch it from the outside. So let's talk about Olaplex for a second, and then we'll get into leadership and marketing philosophy questions. So, obviously Olaplex is a brand that we've paid a lot of attention to, one of the top performing brands from a social media perspective.
Correct.
I've got a little bit of insight into the financials around the business, and I know it is incredibly lean. The profit margins there are obscene, right? So what was it like? What were some of the challenges when you came in? Because obviously you ended up selling it, or it got sold for a ton of money, which is awesome. I'd love to hear both about some of the things that made it special, like why was this such a unique entity, and then what were some of the challenges of being in such a unique entity, right? Being a company that's got 50+% net income margins. Like what is that like? I don't even know what that's like to be at a company like that.
It's awesome. It was interesting. So after the Orbe sale, and now R+Co is the biggest brand in LBP. With the conversation with the partners, obviously we weren't R+Co wasn't to the level that we needed, that Orbe was in terms of the contribution. And so I said, guys, perfect time for me to exit on the operational side because I'm a bigger ticket, quite honestly, and I want to kind of change my life a little. And so I started doing some consulting, and I was doing some consulting and really starting to get excited about skincare. And that's when Dean and Darcy Crystal called. And, they had the brand, they launched the brand. I remember when they launched the brand, I had just left P&G, was going to LBP, Luxury Brand Partners. And, I can do a multicolor process, a multicolor hair color process. I mean, I learned how to do hair color when I was part of Wella. And I remember the buzz around Olaplex. And I remember having a couple of hairdressers who used the product and they were like, this is the real deal. This stuff really, really works. And so I knew that they had an amazing product that actually did what it said it was going to do. And had very quickly scaled in a very non-traditional way, right? Which is kind of in that time. So, but when I got the call from Dean and Darcy, they were calling because they said, listen, we don't have a corporate office. We have people around the country. We don't, we don't have a lot of process stuff. Purposely, we've tried to keep that from doing that. But we know that there's some big opportunities that we're missing. And quite honestly, now that you're not in another job, like we need someone who isn't going to come and try to make us a L'Oreal, and we need someone who knows enough that can come in and say, we need to put this infrastructure in, we need to do this, we need to do that, not change who we are, but make us a little more professional. And then ideally, Sephora's been knocking on the door. We have no idea what to do there. And so we need to figure out how to do that. And so that was the brief, if you will, when I came in. I loved it because we had moved to Austin, Texas, where we were going to plan to retire. And they're like, hey, there's no corporate office, so you can do this out of Austin. I was like, fantastic, right?
Yeah.
When I finally saw how lean the business was, it was an interesting conversation. And so my conversation with Dean at the time was, it's like, Dean, we're not going to make this a corporate thing, but you kind of loosen up a little, because there's some things we got to do. Like, you kind of need a demand planner so that you have inventory. Like, we really, if you're going to really, we're going to make the move and really partner with Sephora, we need to bring someone in who really knows how to do Sephora. And by the way, you probably have to get comfortable in doing travel size SKUs, because that's part of the ecosystem of how you build trial and repeat. By the way, the distributors on the salon side have been asking for that for years, and he was like, we're not going to do it. So it was a bit of bringing just in time capabilities that could show a return, that started allowing us to do a few things that were different and a few things that were more. But one of the things that I would say is, if Dean and Darcy hadn't sold the business, I think the trajectory would have continued to grow, because the thing about it that I think is so special is it's a product that works. It does exactly what it's going to do, and it's powerful. Mm-hmm. It can play with anybody's hair. Like, it can literally repair anybody's hair, and there's so much upside, right, in the opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so, we were able to double that business in about a year, a little over a year. And it's exciting to see how good they're doing now.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I remember it had like 6 SKUs, right? There's like 6, to build a business that big, growing that fast off of 6 SKUs is wild.
There were 4 when I got there.
So you increased it by 50%. That's what you're telling me.
50%. The problem was, the challenge was never that there wasn't any innovation. The challenge was, and I was used to this, right? The challenge was, I've got so many good ideas. Which ones do I go with first, right? And because the team was so lean, and because it was a husband and wife team as well who owned the company, sometimes those battles, that some of the decisions that were made in the first 30 days had been discussions that had been happening for years with the company. But I was the new guy who came in and say, why aren't we doing a shampoo and conditioner? We got it ready. We should launch it. Let's go. So it was some of those kinds of things too. So yeah, but a great brand. I think they created a very different business model globally when they launched, as you know. And so yeah, it was really special time.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about leadership and your approach for a moment. So, I kind of condensed it down into a few different maxims. Tell me if this is a good, an accurate representation of how you think about leadership. Mm-hmm. So surround yourself with the best, right? So recruit star performers, treat people with respect, sometimes having to be brutally honest, right? And then, being a leader is about setting the vision and trying to be a humble servant for those that work for you. Is that a pretty good summation?
I think you nailed it.
So how did you come up with that? Is that something that you just kind of, did you come by those learnings over time, or is this, how did you come up with those in the first place?
I think it was, a lot of it is who I am as a person, right? So my parents always talked about the golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated. The first boss I had at P&G, interestingly enough, also used to talk about that, right? You treat people with respect, etc. So that was kind of who I was. I had a boss at P&G that was the complete opposite of that. Loved to throw things, loved to yell, loved to belittle people. He didn't last long in the organization, but I also remember I lived through early in my career being someone who was in a team led by someone like that, and I hated it. And I would, instead of me thinking about what are the ways that I can bring even more value, I used to think about how can I just do the bare minimum so I can get the hell out of Dodge, because this person is just going to be a nightmare, right? And that was probably the first time that was actively aware of. You hear the wives' tales. You get more flies with sugar, or you attract more, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
true. I mean, if you create an environment that is that's challenging, it's fun, but there's respect, and respect isn't just being nice. Respect is also having the courage to have tough conversations, having the courage to hear tough feedback from your employees to you as the leader. What I found was those environments created much more acceleration than the other, right? And so part of it is, kind of when I finally got to a place where I was leading an organization, I was like, well, I want to be a member of an organization that I would want to be a part of, even if I wasn't the leader of that organization, right? And so it's always been about that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, there's just so much there, right? So I think first, working for an asshole is not fun, right? It's just not an enjoyable experience. And so I haven't had that experience, but I can imagine that being having a big impact on like how you act in the future. I think that second, for me, I think I think I'm pretty good at receiving tough feedback, but I don't think I'm particularly good at giving it, right? I think putting that perspective of, this is a respect thing. Like, I'm here, I respect you, and I trust that you're going to be able to hear this, and that it will be productive, right?
Yeah.
That's a really cool way of framing it, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. I had something else too. What was it? That was it. So, the other thing too that people don't really think about is, this isn't the only job you're ever going to have, right?
Correct.
Careers are actually pretty long. And so if you treat people poorly, number one, they're going to leave. Number two, they're not going to work with you in the future, and they're also not going to refer other people to work with you.
Correct.
So for us, it's like we're working on a product for, a product for the creators right now, and we had no capacity internally to do it. But, we had two of our former engineers who had left to start their own companies. And I was like, hey, guys, they were very entrepreneurial. I'm like, hey, guys, I really want to get this product off the ground. Would you be willing to commit 2 or 3 months to getting this off the ground with me, right? And even though they didn't work with us anymore,
Right.
like, yeah, because they had a great time working with us the first time, and they know that they can trust, they trust how we work. And that if we had been jerks to them, they never would have been open to doing that. And that's just the first decade of my career. We got 3 more decades. That's an army that you can build up over time that is super powerful.
Absolutely. I always talk about this with my organization. I talk about it with my direct reports. I talk about it with new hires. Your reputation is your calling card. And if you're just starting your career, that's a hard one. You can yeah, right. But this is a very small industry. And, I still say this today. Anybody in this industry who's been in the industry for at least a period of time, you're one phone call away from someone getting the real scoop on who you really are and how you really operate. And it's very, very true. I mean, I feel like, one of the things that I think has been helpful for me personally is I feel like I could pick up the phone and call any one of my competitors today, CEOs. I probably know most of them. And even the ones where I may have a direct competitive situation, right? Obviously, we'd never talk about the business, but if there was something I needed to get, I could call and they'd take my phone call, because there is a reputation and a trust that's been built over time. But it does come back to kind of this dynamic of, being a good performer and deliverer, and being a good developer of talent. Over time, it's the most important thing you can do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the bigger the organization gets, the smaller your individual contribution, right? You're a
Correct.
smaller and smaller chunk. So yeah, 100%. I think I've also tried to pride myself on maintaining good relationships with competitors. Yeah. It's always funny to me when they just won't even take your email, and I don't think it's a reputation thing. It's just like they just don't want to do that, right? I don't want to talk to a competitor. And it's like this is gonna be a long career, right? Like we're probably, there's a strong likelihood we're all going to be in the software industry for the next 40 years. So we should probably get to know each other. It doesn't have to be so adversarial all the time.
Totally. Totally.
So let's talk about marketing philosophy a little bit. I have a ton of leadership questions I can ask you, and I think I want to go back to that, but I also want to make sure we have time to talk a little bit about marketing.
Sure.
So for you mentioned that there's been a real explosion of marketing analytics over the last, call it 10 years or so, right? Mm-hmm. So the amount of data available has grown dramatically. And then you talked a little bit about, the data that you use as a kind of direct-to-consumer e-commerce brand versus an omni-channel brand can be quite a bit different. Mm-hmm. What are the different data sources that you recommend for, an e-commerce brand versus an omni-channel brand? And then how have you managed internally? Because again, you kind of have this overflow of analytics. How do you condense that down into the ones that are most important for you guys?
Yeah, that's a great question, Connor. And I think what I would say is we're still on the learning journey, because I think every brand, what is important to a brand is individual to a brand, right? But I would say overall, I think one of the things that we've tried to do is not go down the rabbit holes as it comes to analytics, right? We have to have viable analytics, but we also have to make sure that we know what are the questions we're trying to understand unique to our brand that's going to help us move the needle. I think one of the things, in the direct-to-consumer environment, for us, there's really 4 kind of general things, and I've heard others on your podcast talk about some of these as well. Traffic is critically important. Are you getting people to your website? What's the conversion rate once you get them there? That's obviously important. What's the average order value, the AOV? That's important, right? And then loyalty and repeat are critical factors as a part of that as well. And we're continuously tracking on those elements on the DTC side, where we can with retail partners who are also doing omni-channel in-store and DTC. We're looking at some of the same measures as well to see, are we not only getting trial of our brand, but of our products, but are the consumers who are trying our products liking them and coming back and repurchasing and buying even more? I think that's the fundamentals. What's interesting, when I was going into stores, right, as a Folgers coffee sales rep and as a sales rep in P&G, and then now as a Kate Somerville person who walks into a Sephora, when you're in store environment, there are some of those things that you look at, brand positioning, point of sale, does the brand stand out? So a lot of those conversations related to the physical infrastructure have been important, but I do think that what's going to be interesting as we come out of the COVID situation and as retail gets reinvented, right? Because I do think there will be a reinvention in retail. I think for us, what I'm continuously looking at is how is the consumer. The consumer, I think, will continue to want an experience. They want an experience online. They're going to want an experience in store. But what's that going to look like, right? And how is that going to manifest itself when you have all of the other elements like hygiene and safety and those kinds of things that I think are going to have a little bit of an aftershock, right? So I know I'm kind of talking kind of high level, but I think those are, the kind of the core 4 of traffic, conversion, AOV, loyalty, repeat. We continuously are looking at those kinds of things and then trying to adjust, what we do as a part of that. Yeah,
I mean, I know that the kind of loyalty repeat purchase thing is something that we've spent a lot of time thinking about. I think that number one, probably the best story for it was, I don't know if you know the brand Native Deodorant, right?
Yes,
but,
acquired by P&G.
Yeah, there you go.
It's helping my P&G stock.
So I know Moyes, the founder, and I met him really early on, and he got referred to us as like, oh, Conor's the influencer guy, right? Go talk to him. And the thing I told him was, I was like, honestly, I don't see influencers playing a huge role with deodorant, right? It's just not, like, there's not people, like, actively saying, like, oh, I love this deodorant, and, like, let me try this one and that one. There's a little bit of it, and it's certainly not totally irrelevant, but, it's not to the degree that hair care or fashion or beauty is going to, the role it's going to play in those markets. And I think that earned a lot of trust with him, because he said, oh, everybody else has been trying to sell me influencer stuff. And he's like, and I've always thought it was a waste of time, but now finally somebody tells me it is. And so, but the thing that he did do really well was he just laser focused on his repurchase rate. And when he started, the repurchase rate was around 20%. And then, he's like, okay. So, and then over the next 24 months, they had it was either 18 formulations in 24 months or 24 formulations in 18 months.
Wow.
They just kept recreating the product. They do a little bit here, a little bit there. And then what they would do is they would do A/B tests where they'd say, okay, we're going to sell half of this product, this formulation to this customer and half to this. And then we're going to look at the repurchase rates. And they just kind of hacked that repurchase rate until they got it up to 40+%, which like doesn't sound like a lot, but that's double, right? So that means that every dollar you're putting in the top of the marketing funnel, you're getting twice as many dollars out at the bottom. And so, and that's if you're just looking at the immediate repurchase rate, right? That multiplies out over time from an LTV perspective. And so the reason I say we've been looking at it is the exact same thing holds true in the influencer space, right? Yes. If you are, if you're losing half the influencers that you bring in, right? You get them in, they get excited, they talk about the brand, and then it's just crickets after, or there's no follow-up from the brand.
Bingo.
Like that is, it just kills the whole process.
Bingo.
Yeah, I mean, talk to me about that a little bit. I mean, obviously, you guys have decided that influencers are important for Kate Somerville. Yeah. I would imagine, considering the numbers are
Yes.
skyrocketing. What made you come to that conclusion, and then what do you think has driven your success there?
That's it was very much a choice. And I think, when I entered the brand, I entered at the same time that my CMO, Simon, entered, right? Who I think you've met Simon, and Simon's incredible. Yeah. He's a great business partner. He and I had some of the same kind of ahas, right? So here was an incredible brand with an incredible founder who was still actively involved, an incredible story, a history of great products and iconic products, an active Medi-Spa clinic where we were seeing patients. But the PR and, had really died down to zero. And really had missed, candidly, had missed the boat when it came to influencers, right? You had influencers that were growing, et cetera. And so I think we knew that it was a story that needed to be told, but it needed to be told by people who truly, really believed in the brand and bought into the brand. So it's not to say that paid influencers weren't going to have some kind of a role, but the whole brand was built by Kate when she started the brand, and she started it in the clinic. She had a lot of, she had Paris Hilton and all these celebrities who were coming in because of the treatments, right? But who loved the brand because they felt connected to the brand. And so we felt like that authenticity and creating a relationship with the influencer community was going to have to be part of how we approached it. And that was the decision. And we brought the right people, to the team that brought relationships, but also understood that this was about creating that kind of community, right? And I would tell you, I think, Conor, listen, a lot of brands do that. We're not unique in how we do that, but I would say that I think that the genuine nature and the focus on the relationships with our influencers has been probably the biggest key to our success so far. And I think as we move into 2021, our focus is not only continuing to do that, but also the repeat, right? Keeping the influencers as a part of the family and feeling comfortable and feeling like they are part of the family. So yeah, it was a choice.
That's great to hear. And I think, what's always, I don't know if I'm in an echo chamber and I only invite people on the podcast that agree with me, but, every time I talk to somebody and they tell me about, and it's a brand that's winning, right? And they say, this is how I'm winning. I'm like, that's what I keep hearing. So, but yet not everybody gets it yet. So I think that that's really great to hear. And I think, thinking of these people, right? As people you build relationships with, and really thinking about it from, really from a PR perspective where it's like, hey, I'm here to help you, right? Write your stories, create your content, tell your own story. Let me know however I can support you, and then let me, let's build a real relationship here.
Correct.
Is the long-term path to winning, right?
Correct.
So that's really great to hear. Talking about this kind of, obviously having, a spa or Medi-Spa, allows for this face-to-face interaction. How have you guys changed your strategies specifically as it relates to the influencer space now that face-to-face interactions become a lot less safe and a lot less common?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, our clinic on Melrose Place in LA is back open. We were doing the medical procedures probably 2 months before it became okay for the aesthetic services to open, and our New York City clinic is now open as well. What I was going to say is, I think, part of the early part of our journey, what I would say was the end of last year and beginning of January before COVID shutdowns, it was really getting that curated group of influencers where they were able to not only experience the brand, but have time with Kate, to hear Kate's story, to hear Kate talk about the products, to hear Kate's philosophy. Quite honestly, it was less about the products. It was more about hearing Kate's philosophy around, people who have skin troubles. It affects their entire being. If you can help someone correct their skin, you help them with their whole life, right? And it was that whole kind of that inspirational piece of it. That probably was the strongest thing we were able to do with the influencers we started working with, because they were connecting with the founder and then with the brand from the heart, right? When they went and experienced some of the things related to what we could do in the clinic, right? And how those clinic services transpired into some of the products, right? An oxygen facial, you can take the DQ home with you, and it's the oxygen facial in a can. That's where it started to make the connection between the heart and the mind. Now I understand why this isn't just marketing, hubbub. It's like, and then they started making it their own. And that's when you're in the Holy Grail, when they're starting to talk about the product as a part of who they are and how they operate. As we've had to deal with like every brand and not being able to do face-to-face, I think, we've had to be connecting with them through boxes and virtually and those kinds of things. And quite honestly, as silly as it sounds, Connor, I would say the biggest thing that my team does, which I'm so proud of them on, is we just keep the relationship going. There's conversations and communications that happen without any product conversation, because I think when you get to the point, if you get to a point where the people who are working with you from an influencer standpoint feel like you only talk to them when you want them to push something, that you don't really know who they are or care about who they are, that's when you get into danger, right? And I think our brand, led by our founder, has always been about that heart-to-heart connection, right? And so it's a natural extension of what we've tried to do with our influencers. And during this time, it's been one of the things that I think has been really important. We had a major tier 1 launch this year, Delicate, and we couldn't do press events. We couldn't bring people together. It was all virtually connecting and doing it on a global basis, right? When my friend and colleague Aurelian was talking about what they were doing to kind of create this global infrastructure of how they launch their A's, I follow what Aurelian does, because they're doing some amazing things there. But we were able to do that with Delicate. And so to have a Carolyn Hirons in the UK doing a live with some of the influencers in the UK and Kate, right, all virtually. And then we do the same thing in Australia with Mecca, and we do the same thing in the US with some of our influencers. Like, that's when it starts to feel like, what COVID? Like, this is, I'm part of a family, right? And I'm part of a community. Yeah. So that's how we've been trying to manage it.
I love the integration of the founder. I think that people don't realize that for a lot of these, creators, they are entrepreneurs, right? They're their own small businesses. And so for them, they aspire to be someone like Kate, right? A lot of these people aspire to create their own brand one day.
Correct.
And so to kind of get that insider access for them is just super powerful and very under-leveraged, I think, for a lot of brands and founders. So that's really cool and super smart. Well, let's get into, we're coming up on an hour here. I want to be respectful of your time. So let's do a couple quick hitting questions that you haven't seen yet. So let's start out with, we're going to kind of center on the Oscars for a second, right? So I know you're a famed Oscars commentator. And you mentioned, we'll do that as the second question. But the first question is, you said that you like to drink tequila while you're doing the commentating. What is your favorite tequila that I need to try?
Oh my God, Connor, that is not an easy question, because it all depends. It's like asking a wine connoisseur, what's the favorite wine you should try, right? I think, what I would say is, if you are a margarita drinking tequila drinker, you probably want to start slower with pure tequila. Right. But it depends. Do you like woody taste? Do you like non-woody taste? I personally, I was going to grab it. I love añejo, which I love the añejos.
And heavier oaked stuff.
Absolutely. Even bordering on like mezcal. Because I love that woody, dense kind of taste. And now we're getting into the season, because it's getting cold, where like you can just put on your sweatshirt and sit outside and drink your tequila and like whatever. But I think it's kind of like wine. It's what's your what's your flavor palette, and what's your sensibility. The good tequilas you can sip, right, and you can really do taste the flavor. But you never go wrong with an añejo.
Any favorite brands specifically?
You know what? As a brand guy, this is going to sound horrible. I'm promiscuous.
Yeah, you just change it up all the time.
To me, the people who do tequila are like the people who do wines, right? I think every single barrel can have its own unique nuance to it, and I love the exploration of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was talking with I'm trying to remember his name. He runs the spirits division at LVMH, and what they talked about is people don't know this, but I think they're responsible for like 95% of the champagne in the United States. It's like a crazy number, right? And they were getting really big into rosé, but they stayed out of red wine because, if you look at champagne, it has very high repurchase rates. Yeah. And rosé is the same way, right? People tend to find a rosé they like and then they stick with it. But with red wine, people are very promiscuous, right? They're constantly trying new things. So I tend to be that way for almost everything in life. I just like new. I always want to try something new. So I would say love a margarita, but also love a good añejo. And then I've recently gotten into mezcals a little bit. I was kind of anti at first, but they've grown on me. So
you have to be in the right setting, with the right mindset and the right people. Yeah.
Yep. So tell me what's your favorite Oscars memory, or the one that your favorite Oscars comment that you've given over the years from watching.
I had to stop doing the commentary.
That won't get you in trouble.
That won't get me in trouble. Because remember, the first time I started doing this, it was because I was sitting drinking, and I was like, for some reason, the trip had been canceled, and so I was by myself. And so I just started drinking and just, doing this whole thing. And I'm a little bit of a smart aleck, but I would say probably the Oscar moment for me that was like, wow, was big was when Halle Berry won an Oscar. That was a big deal for me. Because I always loved Halle Berry, and she was the first, woman of color to win an Oscar, and she looked amazing in that dress. And I just thought, this is pretty cool, because it's a really cool thing. We could go hours into all of the hosts that have been with the Oscars, because there have been some good ones and some bad ones. But I'm a little stereotypical in that, to me, the Oscars are about, this isn't the time, I don't believe the Oscars are the time when you show up and try to be avant-garde. That's like the MTV Music Awards. I want you to show up and I want you to look Hollywood. I want you to look glam. I want to know who you're wearing. I want to know who did your hair. I want to know what your makeup is. Like that to me is, it's my Super Bowl. So I want to, that's what's exciting, right?
Well, I think I agree with that. I mean, I appreciate the comedy, right, that they try and integrate, for sure. But if it gets over the top and it kind of overshadows the event itself, I don't think that's the point, right?
Right.
Okay, last question, and then we'll sign off. So, obviously, I would imagine if you're into the Oscars, you're into entertainment. So, what's your favorite show or movie that you've watched during COVID?
Oh my gosh. There have been so many. We're in month 9? Month 9, Connor?
I think it's month 90. I don't know. It's all blurred together.
Do I want to share this publicly? So there's been a ton on Netflix, right? There's been some amazing stuff on Netflix. I have to say I was very skeptical about what Apple TV was going to do. And I loved the newscast show that Jennifer Aniston did.
Yeah. I haven't watched it. Yeah.
Amazing. It is absolutely amazing. It's worth doing it in one fell swoop. It was amazing. So I've seen, so obviously that I watched through all that. I did a ton of series on Netflix. There's a couple that I will be open about because this is horrible. So I'm an unapologetic Real Housewives franchise devotee from the very beginning. And initially I watched the first one because it's how I would have conversations with hairdressers when I walked into a salon, right? I love it, all right? And so over the COVID timeframe, I had stopped seeing some of this, but with On Demand, I've gone back and I've caught up on every season of The Real Housewives, on Bravo, of The Real Housewives, all of the Below Deck episodes, and this is horrible. This is the embarrassing part. I'm now into the TLC channel, right? So like
Oh, wow.
90 Day Fiance,
Yep,
90 Day
yep.
Away. I'm like, what am I doing, right? But it's not a spreadsheet. It's not an issue.
It's just something different,
It's just
right? Yeah.
different, right? And I can sip my tequila when I watch it.
Yeah, no, it's my wife has gotten really into, and then subsequently I watch it a bit. Is the Married at First Sight? Have you seen that one?
Oh my God! You know what? I've prohibited myself from seeing that one.
Oh my God, it's so ridiculous. They get married like the day they meet each other, like at the wedding, and then they decide whether they want to stick together. The wild thing is, I think it has like a higher success rate than like The Bachelor or Bachelorette or any of these other shows. It's like a 25% success rate. Like 1 out of every 4 just stays married for
Wow.
for the whole time. It's pretty crazy. But with that, we'll wrap it up with our terrible shows. And thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate it. I think I learned a lot today. We only got to half the questions I had, which is frustrating, but maybe we'll have to have you on again. And
Anytime,
yeah, we really
Connor.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, we love, I have to tell you, we're big fans of Tribe and your team, and we're really excited about the momentum that you guys are helping us do. And it's anytime. Maybe one of these times you'll get a few of us together and it'll be a real show.
I like that.
We'll do some smart alecky stuff.
I dig it.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Reuben.
Thanks, Connor. Take care.
Hit subscribe now. Earned by Tribe Dynamics. Tribe Dynamics unlocks your social media influencer community. Our platform not only tracks and measures your best influencer relationships, but discovers new influencers to grow your business through earned media. Get started with a demo today at tribedynamics.com. tribedynamics.com.